Lakeland Currents, your public affairs program for north central Minnesota. Closed captioning is made possible by Bemidji Regional Airport, serving the region with daily flights to Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport. More information available at bemidjiairport.org.
Hello again, everyone. I'm Ray Gildow, host of Lakeland Currents. My guest today is talking about a very unique service organization that's located in Minnesota. You may have heard about it and you may not have heard about it, but by the end of this session, you're going to be amazed at what Sourcewell does. My guest is Dr. Chad Coauette, who is the Executive Director and CEO of Sourcewell. Chad, welcome to Lakeland Currents.
Thank you.
First time you've been on here. It's nice to see you. Give us a little background about who you are before we get into what it is that you do.
Yeah, great. Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for having us on, me on, representing a great organization. Well, Minnesota kid at heart, grew up in northern Minnesota out of Crookston, spent some time over at the University of North Dakota, lived in Thief River Falls for several years working in my first part of my professional career in higher education. So I spent time at a couple different two-year colleges across the state, including where I currently reside in Alexandria. Proudly served Alexandria Technical and Community College for about 10 years, and then had the opportunity to join Sourcewell about 10 years ago. So I'm in my 10th year at Sourcewell already. And time goes fast, but it's been a great organization that really, we've been launching into new services, and we'll talk about that in a little while, but just the growth trajectory and the service we've been able to provide from Sourcewell during that time, it's been an amazing career that I've been able to be part of.
Well, maybe we could give the viewing audience a little background about how Sourcewell became. I think it was in the 70s when the legislature established service units in Minnesota. Maybe you could just talk a little bit about that and how it's evolved into who you are today.
Great, I appreciate that. Well, Sourcewell, and you kind of alluded to this early on, is that folks might not know a lot about Sourcewell or the other service cooperatives. In fact, quite frankly, that's okay. We often operate in the background, really helping support K-12 education, higher ed, other government agencies, and helping them streamline processes, get training and education, and really come alongside them to do good work. So often folks don't know much about what are called the Minnesota Service Cooperatives. And to your point, legislation, Minnesota Statute 123A, really technical,
I didn't know that.
came into play that allowed organizations or regions to start what were known as education service cooperative units back in the mid-70s. There's been an evolution since that point in time in what we're called, but what essentially they did, they were empowered 9 different units that covered the entire state. So all 87 counties are truly serviced by one of 9 service cooperatives. We're one of those 9. We represent the 5 counties immediately around Staples and Brainerd. So we represent Todd, Wadena, Crow Wing, Cass, and Morrison counties. We were legislatively enabled to serve those very, very specifically. We do great services outside of that as well, but that is really at the root of who we are. So we're about 45 years in the making. In the last 15 to 20, we've been on a tremendous growth plan.
One of the early things I think that the service co-ops did is provide opportunities for schools that didn't have the money maybe to hire a Spanish teacher or a school psychologist or a nurse. And so those service units provided that service, didn't they, in the early years?
Yeah, shared services were really a huge part of the early design. Like you suggested, helping share administrative staff, or if somebody in a smaller school needed access to something that was more difficult for a small school to get, it was able to create that cooperation to make that possible. And as you also alluded to, Ray, early on in the 70s, the legislation really only had the service cooperative serving K-12 education. In the mid-90s, legislation was changed that we can also serve education as a whole, meaning higher education as well, other government entities, and nonprofits. So the portfolio of those we've served have morphed over time from that early creation of only K-12 to a much broader audience now.
And you still do work with the K-12 districts in your area, right?
Yeah, a lot of work with our K-12 districts.
And then, so do you have someone who is assigned to work with those folks out of your office?
Yeah, we've got, within our organization, we've got a couple different focus areas where we've got point people who direct that work. So we have a gentleman on our team who looks at our more entrepreneurial portfolio of services, and he happens to oversee work that spans North America, quite frankly. And we've got another person on our team who really helps direct and work with other team members focused on serving those in Region 5. So a really tight focus to make sure we are really living out our core purpose to make a difference for those that we serve.
And you do have a board, and how is that board selected?
Yeah, great question. So I have 8 bosses. So we've got an 8-member board of directors who are made up of locally elected officials. So we're a government entity governed locally by other government officials. Part of our bylaws and how we're governed on a yearly basis is that we have, of those 8 board members, 6 of them are school board members, and 2 of them are other elected officials, typically meaning either a mayor or a county commissioner. Right now we happen to have 1 of each. Sometimes we have 2 mayors, sometimes we have 2 county commissioners. But then those 8 board members come from those 5 counties I mentioned earlier. So first, they're elected to their school board. And as then they're a seated school board member, elected on by other school board members within the region to represent them on our board. Same with the county commissioners and mayors. So they're elected by their other elected officials to represent that body on our board. They each have 4-year terms, and every year, 2 of them come up for re-election.
Before Sourcewell was the name, this organization was called the National Joint Powers Alliance.
Yep.
And full disclosure, I worked there for about a year,
Yeah.
and no one knew what that meant. I mean, I often thought people thought it was part of a military operation, National Joint Powers. Could you explain a little bit about that term and how you moved away from that to the Sourcewell that you've got as the name now?
Yeah, I think, just to even reframe that a bit, over our evolution of nearly a 45-year history now of coming into creation, we've had a few different name changes along the way, and essentially we see those name changes as just fitting the evolution of our organization. So we've had a couple names prior to being the National Joint Powers Alliance, which happened in the early 2000s and was with us until we changed to become Sourcewell, at least from a naming perspective, in 2018. So we're already almost 5 years into that name change, which is hard to believe how fast time goes. But at the time when we switched over to the National Joint Powers Alliance from the previous name, it was as we were starting to grow our cooperative purchasing services, and it happened to then allow us to really create a platform to speaking to entities outside of our region. Again, as we've grown and we've morphed and the marketplace has changed for that given service and where we desire to go as an organization, as we went through our process of name change, Sourcewell really fit us better to be a source and a resource for those locally and regionally, as well as a source and resource for solutions for those people that we serve beyond the 5 counties. So the name evolved and adapted as we've evolved and adapted as an organization.
And how many employees do you have, roughly?
Yeah, today we've got about 300 employees.
Wow.
Yeah,
Used to be 18 when I was there.
Yeah, well, and that wasn't all that long ago. Like I said, I'm in my 10th year, and the day that I started back in July 1st of 2013, we had roughly 60 to 65 employees. So even in that 10-year time frame, we've grown considerably, and our portfolio of services that we offer to those that we serve continues to grow as well. So then it's staffing up to provide even greater services. So it's been fun as we've brought on new teammates with new ideas and expertise to really drive home service.
And you talked a little bit about cooperative purchasing. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because I know that's probably an area confusing to a lot of outsiders who aren't realizing you are a government agency and technically, and what you do is designed for, well, you can tell us.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that, Ray. And of course, with your year of work, you learned about who Sourcewell was during that time. And cooperative purchasing is our largest service to this point in time. And when the legislature created us in the mid-'70s, they basically created some boundaries, some directives of of where and how we can serve those that we serve. And they said, go forth and be self-sustaining. We don't get any, we don't have the ability, even though we're a government entity, we don't have the ability to levy taxes, and we can't borrow money. So as we've grown, we've had to be self-sustaining. One of those services that falls into those boundaries that the statute 123A says we can do is help with cooperative purchasing. So helping government entities and other public education entities purchase better. So anybody who's ever paid attention or had to deal with any kind of purchasing with a government entity of any kind can understand that that process can be pretty complex.
Cumbersome.
Cumbersome
Yes.
is another nice word to use for it. I've heard other words for it, but they're not able to be aired. But it's a complex process. So we have a team of specialists at Sourcewell who, as a government entity, we do that work for them. So we've got specialists who do that complex work so that other government entities can leverage that work, get choice in how they make their selections so they can purchase in a much more streamlined, cost-effective way. So if you were to think about buying a piece of equipment, especially in the season we're in, if a county wanted to buy a snowplow, it's a pretty complex process to walk through how they buy that expensive, complex piece of equipment. Well, the process that our specialists go through really helps streamline that, makes it simple. And rather than having every government entity who's going to buy a snowplow figure out how to do that on their own, we're able to do that one time as a public entity serving other public entities, where then those entities can leverage that work that's already been done on their behalf. So whether that's a significant, expensive piece of equipment or construction process, all the way down to office supplies or emergency services equipment, anything on the in-between of that, we've done this work that other government entities can really leverage to create efficiencies and buy better.
I know, having grown up through the college system, how cumbersome it was to go and get bids. Maybe we're just going to do re-roofing of a building. That was a long process. It took a long time. So you shorten that process by having vendors who have already made their bids, and they can throw their name in the hat if they want to approach them.
Yeah, it's depending on which one of those, it could be again a bit more complicated to explain than that. But in essence, our government team is doing work on behalf of other government entities that they can leverage. Oftentimes in a shorter way, oftentimes much more streamlined, and oftentimes at a much more at a better price point as well.
And how do you define government agencies?
Yeah, as broadly as you can think: cities, counties, municipalities, fire stations, police departments, schools, colleges. It's really a really broad spectrum that we serve, and not just in the 5 counties, but quite frankly across North America.
And when this started in the National Joint Powers Alliance, I think it started with copy machines.
Yeah.
That was the major item,
Yeah.
and that grew very, very quickly too.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the range, the broadness of
Yeah.
what you do and where you go?
Yeah, so we started what I would say is an iteration of what our current cooperative purchasing program is back in 1998. There's a gentleman who Ray knows well, a gentleman named Mike Hike, started at that organization with a bit of a dream to grow a better way to do cooperative purchasing. So starting in 1998 and early on into his tenure, really launching where we're at in the copy machine space. And today that has grown, again, whether that's heavy equipment, so again, think snowplows or construction equipment, to construction projects, to office equipment, office supplies, fire trucks, ambulances, anything on the in-between of that you could imagine an entity may want access to. We've likely have been in process on those or already have those awarded contracts in what's a significant portfolio available to entities to use.
So if company X in a rural area says, well, that's not fair, I don't get a chance to put my bid in, they really still do have a chance to put a bid in, don't they? If they wanted to?
We again, without getting too detailed into that, we advertise a solicitation. So what the category is, for instance, it might be heavy construction equipment. organizations get to say on a national scale, we'd like to put a proposal in for how we might do that work. Those are often awarded at a national level, but then leveraged out through those local dealer networks. So whether it's an implement dealer that you may recognize from down the street, it may be awarded at the national level, but those implement dealers that you might recognize in the small towns scattered all across Minnesota and beyond are the ones who are still doing those sales and working with those folks that they know very locally.
So how do you leverage that financially for your organization?
That's great. So it is, as we said, we can't levy taxes, we can't borrow money, so everything we do has to be self-sustaining. Right now, cooperative purchasing is a service that we provide that provides revenue back that helps sustain the program. It helps keep the lights on at the organization. It helps us hire additional people onto our team. And then it allows us to really make what our board considers really strategic reinvestments back into our region. So you'd asked earlier about our work in K-12 education and maybe some other work locally. So for instance, in K-12 education, some of those reinvestments will allow us to work with schools to help them with, right now, a pressing area we're hearing from superintendents and other school leaders are career and college readiness. So how do we help kids be thinking about whatever lies next beyond high school? So whether that's going directly into the workforce, going into the military, or higher education of some form or fashion, we're helping those schools with creating networks where teachers who might be doing like jobs in different school districts, connecting them so they can share experiences, creating experiential learning opportunities for the teachers to learn what's happening out in the field, to share equipment, to purchase and share equipment that maybe small school districts can't own on their own, and then have curriculum that goes with it so teachers can learn about that piece of equipment so they can incorporate it into their own instruction. So career and college readiness is a space that we believe is a role for us to come alongside our school districts to help them accomplish their goals for their students. Another example of how we reinvest back into the region. Right now, we've been doing a lot of work with emergency management services. So fire departments, sheriff's office, other first responders, help them with a considerable amount of training. And then as an example, just recently we partnered with a regional nonprofit between some funding that we had and some grants that they've had, put together what are known as jump bags, or these jump kits that every first responder in the region has access to. So they can have a bag, or each of them have a similar bag, quite frankly, of equipment that if they're the first on scene, they have all of their equipment with them in their own car where they've flown out the door to hurry up to get somewhere. Each of them has the life-saving equipment they need at their fingertips. And if they're out of something and another first responder comes, they've got a similar bag to be able to share equipment, to know who has what, to be able to really make, when seconds and minutes count, to really make a difference. So that's another way we've been working within the region. One thing that I should go back to a K-12 instance that we're really, really proud of. And a few folks who were maybe reading the Brainerd newspaper in the last couple weeks would have saw a news story about a ribbon cutting that just happened at the Brainerd School District about a special education facility.
Back in 2016, Brainerd Public Schools began a multi-million-dollar journey of improving the school district. One of the last facilities of the entire 6-year project had its dedication earlier this evening.
It's awesome that we are finally able to be here. It was a long 4 years, a long planning process, but it's really cool just to finally be in the building and see how it works with the kids in the spaces.
To be having the ribbon cutting today for the Lincoln Education Center and our Atlas program is just heartwarming, because we are providing the highest quality education for every single student in our school.
The Lincoln Education Center is a separate site educational program providing special education services for students with emotional and behavioral disorders as part of the Atlas program, which stands for Area, Transition, Learning, and Skills.
Probably 5 or 6 years ago, somewhere in that ballpark, a few of our board members and team members were holding listening sessions with regional superintendents just to hear their pain points and where Sourcewell could come alongside them to really help make a difference in the region. And one of the things we heard loud and clear was that the special education facilities in the 5-county region just were inadequate, and in some cases poor. So we heard superintendents and school boards at those locations say, if you could help us somehow over time either renovate or build new special education facilities, it would make a huge difference for the kids, for those families, for those school districts and communities. So our board committed a fairly sizable reinvestment a couple of years ago to help build and or renovate 4 special education facilities, 1 in Wadena, 1 in Little Falls, 1 in Walker, and 1 in Brainerd. So the one that I referenced, the ribbon cutting that happened just a few weeks ago, it was the Brainerd facility, which was the 4th and final of that vision that the board had, that our staff helped execute on then with the team members from each of those special education facilities, as we capped off that reinvestment of helping build 4 new facilities that really we believe are going to be legacy leaving and changing for those kids and those families who are impacted by that. And we're really excited to say, without our cooperative purchasing services and without other services that are those entrepreneurial, revenue-generating, self-sustaining programs we need to drive, we could have never done that. So we're very, very proud of that investment and believe it will have an impact for many, many, many years to come.
So your service, cooperative purchasing, excuse me, generates revenue.
Correct.
And you can take a percentage of that for yourself. And I know through state laws, you can only have a balance of a certain amount, can't you? Do you have to distribute the rest of it back to the region? How, in general, how does that work?
Yeah, in general, our board has passed what we call a reserve policy. So how much money should we have in the bank? What are high levels? What are low levels? And it triggers then management decisions on how we can do some other work. For all practical purposes, our board has said, let's make sure we continue to do the great services we're going to do. So whether that's cooperative purchasing, working with K-12, a variety of other entrepreneurial services that provide a great service and generate revenue to come back in to self-sustain, again, keep the lights on, grow our services by hiring additional people, and then have the ability through all of that to continue to make those strategic reinvestments right back here in the 5-county region that we serve to really continue to make an impact now and really out into the future.
Do any of the other service units in Minnesota do what you do on the purchasing side? They do? They
do, and there are 9 there's 9 service cooperatives total. We're one of them. And over a 45-year history of the evolution of when we were created to say, go out and be entrepreneurial, every one of us looks different. We're created out of the same statute, the same ability generally to do those things that the statute creates boundaries around, of these are the kinds of services you could do. But based on the needs of that given region, based on leadership, based on board support, each one looks slightly different. So to say yes, the other 8 service cooperatives do cooperative purchasing to a level. We do it to a different level, looks slightly different, but everybody is trying to meet the needs of their given stakeholders, just all, quite frankly, slightly differently.
What you've got, one of the potential discussion items here is, what's the future going to look like for your organization?
Yeah, I'm really excited about the future as I look back, and as I said earlier, I'm in year number 10. I think we are really positioning for a growth of continuing to scale into the future to provide more great services. Again, those services that are going to allow us to reinvest in ourselves, into our current programs, grow new programs, and then really make an investment back into the region. As a public entity, one of the things that's fun to be in the position that I'm in is that we don't have shareholders or stockholders. All of our proceeds get reinvested back into the organization and directly into the region. So it gets to be converted into impact. So one could even say that you get this flywheel turning of the more good we do, the more good we get to do. And that's a fun spot to be in, especially as you look forward into a future of what we believe of significant service and growth. So we've got a board of directors who we've talked about earlier, who is very supportive, future focused, and really passionate about making a difference for those we serve. We've got a team who's oriented in that same way. And even though we've been around for about 45 years and we've had different evolutions across that, it feels at times like we're just truly getting started. And I'm really excited about what that brings for the future of our organization.
And you sort of define what people are eligible to work with you. Just an ordinary nonprofit isn't necessarily.
They are.
Or they are. So any nonprofit could contact you guys about working with you to see what the services are that you offer.
Correct.
That's pretty cool.
It is
you
cool.
work with a lot of nonprofits?
We do work with a lot of nonprofits. It's not by any means one of the larger segments of the work we do, but we do have a significant profile with our nonprofits.
And you have pretty good participation from the K-12 system in your region that you serve?
Very strong participation with our K-12 districts, and growing. We've got a team of folks who get really connected with our regional school leadership to come alongside them, hear what their pain points are, where they need help, where they could use help, and not even just help today, but what might they need help with in 3, 4, 5 years from now, and try to continue to think out that far to help those districts, again, accomplish the goals that they have for their districts.
I've noticed a couple times, and you correct me, I'm not sure of the term anymore, but I think you were identified as one of the best places to work in Minnesota. Is that true?
We've been very, very honored to have the Star Tribune on their top. The names changed over time, went from the top 100 to the top 150 to the top 200, but we have been fortunate and blessed to have been listed on that list, I think 7 consecutive years or 6 consecutive years. With one year we were listed as a top workplace, and the other years we've hit that ranking of either being a top 150 or a top 200, and we're very pleased for that. Our team collectively put some intentionality really about how we work together, and when awards and recognitions like that come out, it shows that intentionality is really working.
So do they send people up to survey you guys when they do that?
There's a survey that goes out that all staff, and I think we've had nearly 100% staff participation in that the last several years. And they're looking for honest feedback about all facets of our organization, and then compared to other entities, how do we rank in that? And it's particularly rewarding when an award like that comes out, because it is based off of feedback directly from the staff members.
We're out of time, but how do people contact you if they want to find out what you do, if you can work with them or not?
Yeah, you can reach out to me at Chad Coauette at sourcewell.mn.gov.
We'll try to put that on the end of the
We'll
show.
put it on the end of the show.
We've got a website.
We've got a website. You can check out sourcewell.org, and you can find me.
Well, it's fascinating what you're doing. The growth has been phenomenal. You're obviously doing a great job. Thanks for jumping on with us. Appreciate it.
It's always fun to tell the story. Thanks.
You've been watching Lakeland Currents. I'm Ray Gildow. So long until next time.